Hi there, Rachel Bradley here, licensed principal real estate broker in the beautiful state of Oregon. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about buyer representation and why I think it's extremely important for a buyer to have an agent representing their best interest. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to touch on a few different topics. And also I'll talk a little bit about buyer consultations and some of the changes that we have seen in regards to buyer agreements and compensation. So the number one reason that I think it's important to have a buyer's agent representing you is because once you have signed that buyer broker agreement, that agent has a fiduciary duty to you as the client. Therefore, your interests are put above everybody else's, including the agents and obviously including the seller on that transaction. Now, if you go, say, straight to a listing broker to buy a house without any representation, you are what's called an unrepresented buyer. And that listing broker has a fiduciary duty, an obligation to represent the best interests of their client, which is the seller. So as you can imagine, when you are making such a large purchase, purchasing a home is the biggest purchase that most people make in their lifetime. It makes a lot of sense to have an agent that is representing your best interest. So I want to talk a little bit about a buyer consultation. A buyer consultation, I think, is extremely important, especially today, because no longer can an agent show you a house without having a signed buyer agreement. So the buyer consultation gives you, the buyer, an opportunity to meet that agent to make sure you are confident in their abilities to close your transaction and to make sure that they have the experience and expertise that you are going to want when it comes to purchasing a home. Now, when I have my buyers come in for a buyer consultation, I go over the whole entire home buying process. We talk about everything from contracts to escrow to home inspections to closing costs and all the other costs involved with purchasing a home. I can answer any questions that you may have. And it also gives me an opportunity to really understand you and to understand the type of home that you're looking for, so that hopefully I can save us some time by not looking at properties that are not going to be a fit. And lastly, it gives you an opportunity to meet your agent. Make sure that you're comfortable with that agent. Make sure that they have the experience, and hopefully you've done a little research online, made sure that they have good reviews, and that you're confident that they can, handle your transaction from start to close. Transactions, it can take a while. It can take a while to find the home that you're looking for. I've spent years sometimes with clients touring properties and exploring neighborhoods and coming to terms with exactly what type of home they're looking for. So it can be kind of a process before we find a house. So make sure that you're comfortable with that agent. Make sure that you know that that agent is going to be dedicated to you throughout this process. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and I've touched on this a little bit, but let's talk about some of the changes that have taken place in regards to buyer agency. Like I stated before, no longer can an agent just randomly show you a house. So if you go to Zillow, you say, show me a house, that agent has to have you sign a buyer broker agreement before showing you a property. So what is this buyer broker agreement? One of the main things that buyers are really concerned about, of course, is the commission. So this buyer broker agreement outlines how much commission your buyer's agent will be paid upon a successful close of this transaction. Now, it used to be that commission was listed on the MLS. The seller would agree with their listing broker ahead of time how much commission to offer that buyer's agent, and that would be public knowledge. That is no longer. So you now, as the buyer, agree with your buyer's agent before you've even toured a house what that commission is going to be. Now, the buyer can still ask the seller to compensate their buyer's agent, but no longer is that commission, public knowledge. So the seller could refuse. The seller could say, nope, I'm not going to pay your buyer's agent's commission. You can do that. So now as a buyer, you have a choice. You could, one, pay your buyer's agent yourself, cash out of pocket. You could, two, try to wrap that fee into your loan. So maybe we could increase the purchase price. We would talk to your lender and come up with the best way to do that so that you're not coming up with cash out of pocket. And the other thing would be, you could say, you know what, we don't want that house bad enough. We're going to wait for a property where the seller is willing to pay our buyer's agent's commission. So, I touched on three things there, really. Why I think a buyer's agent is important, buyer consultation, and how I think it's a really great for a buyer to kind of pick your pick your agent before you pick your house. Do your research, make sure you're comfortable with that buyer's agent and you're confident that they are going to handle your transaction from start to finish. And lastly, some of those big changes, which are number one, you have to have a buyer agreement signed before even touring a house with an agent. And number two, that those commissions are no longer listed on the MLS, and that the seller has no longer agreed up front what they're willing to pay a buyer's agent. Now, what have I seen though across the board? I've seen that sellers are still willing to pay for those buyer agent fees, and there's usually a little bit more of a negotiation, but at the end of the day, I've been seeing that buyer's agents are still getting compensated the same. So I know that was kind of just a dump of information there. I hope you find that information helpful. If you would like to sit down with me and have a buyer consultation, my office is in Lake Oswego, Oregon, and I am always happy to help. Happy house hunting.